Welcome back, everyone. So, last night, I'm relaxing. I need something to put on in the background. And there is the Angry Video Game Nerds video on Super Nintendo versus Sega Genesis. Now, those two consoles, while I have played on them, they are a little bit before my time. And that console war in particular, that feud, I didn't get to live through it. However, watching that video, it was a great reminder of a lot of memories in my own childhood and adolescence about different video game communities, fans of games, and even the games themselves going to war. And so that inspired this idea of video game rivalries. I'm going to talk about 10 examples here. I could go on with 20, 30, and even more, but I will let everyone fill in more in the comments section. So here are just 10 that I've experienced or witnessed that I thought would be fun to share as we walk down memory lane. So the first one that I want to talk about is directly inspired by the console wars. But rather than focusing on some Nintendo versus PlayStation versus Xbox, I want to talk to you about handhelds, specifically the PSP versus the Nintendo DS. And I actually lived through this, I believe, in junior high. Now, you could think of this as Android versus Apple. On one hand, you have the PSP, kind of representing Android, and the ability to mod your phone or mod your device however you want. And on the other hand, the Nintendo DS is much like an Apple device, where it's basically going to run the way that it comes out of the box, or with its factory default settings. You're not necessarily going to dive in and change too much, at least not us teenagers. The couple of people who own PSPs, they modded their devices. And us Nintendo DS fans, I mean, we're happy with our console and our games. We probably wouldn't trade them for the PSPs, but we're still watching in envy as these people are modding their devices and becoming little multimedia platforms. So they could play movies, right? Some people who are on the bus, they would usually watch movies or TV shows. They could listen to music. I thought it was kind of funny when they would mod their devices to emulate old Nintendo games like Pokemon Ruby and Sapphire or whatever. Now, I would say there were no winners and losers in this particular battle. In fact, as I go on with the rest of the list, we're not going to care about who won and who lost this war. Most of them are actually really silly. As I get into other examples, you'll see exactly what I mean. I would say that fans of both devices would be incredibly happy with what they had and what the consoles continued on with, right? So I went from the DS to the 3DS. I still play my 3DS to this day. It's probably my favorite handheld of all time. And then the PS Vita that followed the PSP, even more powerful, even more emulation capabilities. So happy fans on either side, and we can go on to the next battle. Next, let's talk about mascots. Now, when the AVGN did his video, he talked about Mario versus Sonic. And of course, that is still a relevant battle today. But one that I went through, it's not what you're thinking, although I'll get to that one later, was actually Samus versus Master Chief. Yes, I kid you not, I saw this online. It may have been because of GameFAQs or maybe some other forums and websites. Samus versus Master Chief for the sole reason that they are both enhanced humans inside these power suits. You don't need more of a reason than that to pit two characters against each other. Sometimes Doom Guy was thrown in, and I guess in that instance, it was kind of like, it's not just Nintendo versus Xbox or Samus versus Master Chief, but here's another power suit user, and here's another platform being represented, right? Doom Guy for PC. I thought that was a pretty funny one. I told you, a lot of these would be really silly. This was a frivolous battle. At the time, I couldn't pick a favorite. I loved both Samus and Master Chief, and you know what? I still do. They're both great characters that come from great series. And since we're talking about Master Chief, I can introduce the next battle, Halo versus Call of Duty. Now, you might be wondering, Halo versus Call of Duty, how do those two series have a rivalry? When I was in high school, I played Halo 3 and loved it. Call of Duty 4 came out over the winter break. I loved that. And it didn't diminish my love and enjoyment of Halo 3. I went back to that game. I ping-ponged between the two. I would play Call of Duty 4 online with some friends, and then I would have Halo 3 LANs with others. What happened was, in the esports side of things, Call of Duty essentially snuffed out Halo's popularity. So back in the day, MLG, Major League Gaming, was the premier North American esports organizer. They climbed to fame putting on tournaments for Halo 2. I was tuning in a ton when they did Halo 3, and not so much afterwards. What I believe happened back then is MLG had to move on to Halo Reach. And think about it, you're putting on these expensive tournaments, you need a little bit of help from the game developers. Microsoft wants to sell copies of Halo Reach. Even though Halo 3 is the better game, that's not where Microsoft is going to be making their money. So as MLG started to market Halo Reach in different tournaments, I think a lot of the Halo fans just kind of backed away from the competitive scene. Meanwhile, Activision, releasing Call of Duty year after year after year, just continued to climb in viewership. And so a lot of fans of Halo were left feeling completely jaded. What is this? Call of Duty continued with all the success, and Halo basically just gets forgotten? Well, it's not any fault of Call of Duty's or any fault of the fans of either game necessarily. I think what happened was a business decision, and maybe if MLG or some other tournament organizers just kind of stuck to Halo 3, things may have turned out a little bit differently, kind of like Super Smash Bros. Melee and how it's still popular today. But hey, that's a what-if scenario. And speaking of esports, we got to talk about Dota versus League of Legends. Now, many of you know that I'm a huge fan of Dota 2. It's one of my favorite games of all time. I think it is one of the best games of all time, period. Even though it's got its balancing issues every now and then, even though I might rage at the game every now and then, I'll always have a soft spot for Dota, and I always recognize it for the great game that it is. I did play some League of Legends, so I'm not just an anti-League Dota fanboy. These two games have gone back and forth with each other, not so much in the viewership department. League of Legends tournaments always dominate in that aspect, but the fans of the games are so passionate, saying, oh, Dota's better, oh no, League is better, oh, you suck if you play League, oh, well, your game sucks if you play Dota. It's childish, it is what it is. I don't need to get too deep into this battle. But I will say it's interesting how, in many ways, this online rivalry was actually preceded by StarCraft 2 versus League of Legends. So Dota came out about a couple of years after these two, and that left enough time and a nice space online on Twitch TV for people to watch either StarCraft or League of Legends. Of course, you could watch both, but it was typically one or the other. At least that's how it felt when I was tuning in online. Because MLG was putting on some StarCraft 2 tournaments, and because I was more of an RTS fanboy, I would be on the side of StarCraft 2. It was nice to see it get the victories every now and then, but they were few and far between. Of course, League's popularity started out nice and early, and they have not slowed down since, at least not to my knowledge. I alluded to this next one a little bit earlier. Smash versus virtually every other fighting game, I guess you could say it that way. So Super Smash Bros., for some reason, or to some people, it's not included as a fighting game. It's just a party game. It's just for babies. Obviously, I'm one of the people who thinks that Smash is a fighting game. I mean, what else are you going to call it? It has fighting mechanics and fighting elements. It is a fighting game, whether you like it or not. Not everybody in the fighting game community views it that way, but a lot of people do, and that's where this came from. A lot of it was because Super Smash Bros. Melee was getting more views online than your Tekkens, than your Street Fighters, and your Marvel vs. Capcoms. Now, EVO was the organization that used to put on these fighting game tournaments, and correct me if I'm wrong, I haven't tuned in a really long time, and I only watched for a few years, but they did not have Smash tournaments. Smash tournaments were always independent and isolated. And so you would just see these viewership numbers where the fighting games like Street Fighter would just be a little bit lower than whatever Melee finals were happening. I could be wrong on this, but that's the gist of what I'm remembering right now. And the Smash fans would always be lording that over the fighting game community's heads. Childish, immature, absolutely. Really fun to watch from a backseat perspective, though. Next up, remember when I was talking about mascots? Maybe you were thinking of this rivalry, Link versus Cloud, but I more specifically want to talk about Ocarina of Time versus Final Fantasy VII. These two games, these are classics. This rivalry, most people should know about. And I want to take you back to some of the glory days of the internet when GameFAQs was a thing. Yes, I'm going to sound ridiculous for saying that because many people never thought that GameFAQs was cool, but hear me out. Every now and then, actually not every now and then, I think annually, GameFAQs would have these tournaments where you could vote on the best game of all time or the best character of all time. And there would constantly be finals with Link versus Cloud, Ocarina of Time versus Final Fantasy VII. And me, being more of a Nintendo fanboy, right, I was always rooting for Link. I was always voting for him. Happy to see Ocarina of Time win. Every now and then, Final Fantasy VII would win or Cloud would get the edge. Sometimes other characters even snuck in. I had a little bit of fun just before getting on the camera here, and I quickly pulled up some old websites, see if I could find anything about these tournaments. Sadly, GameFAQs, they have 404 for these pages, so I couldn't load anything directly. But I did find a couple of forums where they were discussing these tournaments. So I'll just put them up on screen. You guys can enjoy reading about those. And yeah, I mean, that is, like I said, a rivalry as old as, well, the 90s, I guess. But it's a classic. Everybody should know about Final Fantasy VII versus Ocarina of Time. And if you didn't, then I'm telling you now. Speaking of Final Fantasy, how about Final Fantasy versus Dragon Quest? Now, you might be thinking, if this one sounds really weird to you, why Final Fantasy versus Dragon Quest? Why not the two series living in harmony? Well, this is just kind of the Wild West of JRPGs, I guess, or something that I experienced when I was growing up. Now, I had played a little bit of Final Fantasy, not too many games just yet, and I had never played Dragon Quest. So of course I would be on the side of Final Fantasy, but I wasn't a vehement or a staunch defender of the series. Really, the only people who were arguing about this were the really nerdy types who had to crown a king of JRPGs. And, you know, you kind of get the sense that, looking back, these people were fairly casual themselves. Like, Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, what about some of the other JRPG series? What about Breath of Fire? Or what about, Shin Megami Tensei? Well, these were the longest running Japanese role-playing game series, so I guess some people just felt the need to have one be a winner and the other be a loser. You know what? Now, like I said, everybody kind of lives in harmony, and I think everyone's just happy that JRPGs are flourishing again. And how can you talk about rivalries without mentioning Pokemon? Pokemon versus Digimon. Now, from what I remember, this really started with the shows. The Pokemon anime versus the Digimon anime. There was a little bit of Pikachu versus Agumon, but this did bleed into the video games as well. It doesn't really become much of a competition when that is the case. Like 90% of people are probably going to pick a Pokemon game over a Digimon game. And kind of like with Final Fantasy versus Dragon Quest, both fan bases are really quieted down since then. In fact, the Pokemon fan base now is so massive, and there have been so many different games that there's more infighting than anything. People who say that this version's the best, right? The black and white fans or the DS games versus not many people, but let's just say the 3DS games, for example, or the classics, red, blue, and yellow. But still, Pokemon versus Digimon was a thing that did bleed into the video games. Yes, it was more about the shows earlier on in this life cycle of the battle, but I wanted to mention it here. Next is another lopsided battle, Minecraft versus Terraria. Now, early on in Minecraft's life, I want to say, if not beta, then on its earliest full releases, Terraria was also picking up a lot of steam because people were not necessarily happy with either Minecraft's development speed, or maybe it oversold some of the freedoms or some of what you could do with the building blocks. Terraria, even though it was limited to 2 dimensions, it seemed to have a lot of capabilities as a more complete game. You could do a lot with the wiring in that game. The base building, some people just preferred. I never understood that aspect of it. I could see how it was at the time more of a complete game. Since then, Minecraft has had a lot of enhancements and additions to its end game and post game. Look, I'm a fan of both games. My friends were fans of both games as well. Some only played Terraria, but it's not like they disliked Minecraft. Some of my friends only play Minecraft, but when they look at Terraria, they go, oh yeah, that's kind of a cool game. And both games have obviously been tremendously successful. Minecraft more so, but Terraria also spawned a lot of Terraria clones. A lot of game developers took that 2D inspiration and did their own thing with it. Now, where I saw a lot of the heat of this battle was on some online forums where, again, much like what I've already discussed with some of these previous games, fans of Terraria were going, oh, Minecraft's for babies. Oh, Minecraft just sucks. Oh, it doesn't have enough. Oh, Notch can't develop a good game. And then the Minecraft fans are going, okay, well, your game's a joke. Like, first of all, you've downgraded going from 3D to 2D, and it's never going to be as popular as Minecraft. Silly, like childhood schoolyard type insults flying both ways. But what do you expect from the internet? Finally, we are going to wrap up this list with Bethesda infighting. I could not just pick one game from here, and I've witnessed so many online arguments between these games. Let's start with Morrowind versus Oblivion versus Skyrim. Skyrim obviously dominates with the numbers, but I think the most ardent Elder Scrolls defenders, it's not even about the series. Like I said, there's infighting. So the Morrowind fans don't even like the Skyrim fans. They think that they're a bunch of normie, modern casuals, throw every synonymous insult that you can at those players. Meanwhile, the Skyrim people don't really care because they've got the more successful game, and they look at these Morrowind fans like, what are you doing stuck in the past? Very humorous when you watch what some of these two fan bases say to each other. And the Oblivion fans are just kind of there in the middle like, well, we like our games. I mean, Oblivion's got a ton of great mods, And Elder Scrolls fans also sometimes don't understand why the infighting. On the other side of Bethesda, you have the Fallout series. New Vegas fans are very much the same way. Now, from what I've witnessed, the New Vegas fans themselves aren't that bad. I see a lot more people being angry at the New Vegas fans that they're not moving on, that they're not embracing the rest of the Fallout series. Obviously, I've only got a small little slice of the internet, even though I've been perpetually online for the better part of my life. But that's what it seems like to me. Where the Fallout New Vegas fans, they're just kind of doing their own thing. They're modding their game. Maybe it's overrepresented as one of the best games of all time, but it's one of my favorite games of all time too. And then you've got Fallout 4 fans, Fallout 76 fans going, grow up already, get with the times. I don't know. It's funny. I'll leave it at that. So guys, that is it. Just 10 examples of some little video game feuds and rivalries that I wanted to go over with everybody. Some that when I was writing them down, I had a good chuckle just remembering some of the stuff that I witnessed. If you have any of your own, whether it be the characters, esports, consoles, handhelds, peripherals, whatever, put it in the comments section. It's going to be a lot of fun reading those comments as well. Thanks everybody for watching. See you in the next one.